Lawmakers in Mississippi say they're very, very, very close to a medical marijuana bill. Cannabis-related arrests in New York City fall 95% after legalization. Who'd have thought? Maryland lawmakers begin to think about maybe discussing the possibility of perhaps considering options for one day legalizing adult use. Well, folks, that's what's going on today, and much more than that. And of course, we have with us today, or we will have with us today, our chief health and wellness correspondent. I'm talking about the one and only Faye Berger Mitchell, who'll be joining us shortly. But we're so glad you joined us here today on VoteProPot-Cast. And Jay, now what's the deal of this? Did they really legalize? It's legal in New York City, right?
I don't think everything's in place yet with dispensaries and all that, as I understand it. But
they haven't actually passed any regulations in. It's interesting because New Orleans has now just announced they're going to decriminalize cannabis.
Right.
Because
all right.
And apparently the cops. It's going to free up the police to concentrate on more on violent crimes. And it's just ridiculous that they're spending all this time or arresting anyone to this. And now if you do get caught smoking in public, you'll get a ticket as if you were smoking a cigarette somewhere where you shouldn't be smoking.
Well, you know, especially in a city like New Orleans where you can walk down the street with liquor. And it's perfectly fine. But this whole thing about cannabis-related arrests falling after they legalize. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but what's to arrest if it's legal?
Well,
how does it not fall 100%?
No, because you can still get arrested for selling it.
Oh, yeah, well, there's that. Well, there's that, yeah.
This is an article in Gantrepreneur by T.G. Braunfeld. We cover his stuff all the time. And what it says is that the arrests are down 95% in the second quarter of this year over the first quarter of this year since they passed the law. It says that there were only 8 arrests in the second quarter of 2021, while in the first quarter it was 3,700 arrests.
Jeez.
Yeah. And so the 8 arrests that were in the city were for a newly created legal category that was created under the legalization law that includes unlawful possession violations, which is possessing more than 3 ounces.
More than you're supposed to, right?
Right. Criminal court summonses in the city also fell from 3,700 in the first quarter again to just 8. So, hey, it works. How about that?
Well, that's great news. That's great news. And now closer to home here in our state, and when I say our, I mean Andrew in my state.
Not mine.
Of Maryland. No, you're
my previous state.
You guys are you in Virginia are set.
I wouldn't go that far.
And in fact, you are about to take possession of some legal mature weed plants. Are you not?
I am. Someone that I know, someone that I'm close to, is got their house on the market.
They're gifting you,
and they have a tent with a couple of plants in it, close to mature plants. And the real estate agent said, you might not want this in the house.
When we go to sell.
So this person asked me, gosh, would you babysit my plants for me? I'll come over and take care of them. I just need a place to put them. So, yeah, I'm about to be a godfather of 3 mature plants. So I told him, I said, I can't guarantee the buds will still be there when you come over. But, yes, I will. I am looking forward to it. I think it's neat. It's cool because I haven't gotten around to grow and plant. But, I have several friends here in the state who are growing now. And one friend of mine showed me some pictures. He must have had 10 mason jars packed full of cleanly cut buds, man. They were beautiful looking.
Yeah, isn't that? And how many plants did that come from?
I'm not in position to say. Yes, 3. Of course. 3 plants.
Of course, yeah, 3 because that's the legal limit.
That's the legal limit. So, yeah.
Well, actually, 4 is the legal limit.
Well, unless he and his wife live there.
I think then you can have
each
6.
Of you can grow. Yeah, then you can have 6 maturing plants.
I believe that's right. I think it's a maximum of 6 per house. Yeah.
Per household. Okay.
Of flowering plants, you can have.
Is that what it is?
You can have immature and then you can have mature.
Each person can have 3 flowering and 3 vegging.
I should know that, being a Virginian.
And and to the immature plants, I just say, grow up.
Grow up.
But back to Maryland. A group of Maryland lawmakers met this week, and they're discussing plans for a 2022 ballot initiative to legalize cannabis for adult use and to implement an actual regulated cannabis market in the state, which is way beyond past due. As the Senate leader in Maryland said, the House Cannabis Referendum and Legalization Work Group was appointed by House Speaker Adrienne Jones, who is a big proponent of legalization. She really wants this referendum on the ballot for 2022. Now, what they want to do, and this is part of the reason why I want to say Maryland's been dragging their feet, but they're really kind of not. They really want to identify the lessons learned from other legal states and craft legislation based on best practices one way or another, because some states have gotten some parts of it really right and other parts of it really wrong. Some of them got it all wrong. And what they want to do is get a piece of legislation they can get behind and put it directly to the voters.
Well, Andrew's been directly involved with the politics of legalization in Maryland for
he certainly has. In fact, that was the impetus for his founding of VoteProPot in the first place.
So why does it take so long in Maryland, Andrew? I mean, God, they've been trying to get adult use for 5 years now or something. What the hell?
Well, it took like 3 or 4 years to get medical up and running. So what do you expect?
Yeah, I know,
right,
but
that happened back in 2012.
In fairness, right? That was still in the infancy sort of stage of legalization in some ways. So everybody was taking a while. Well, not everybody, but most were trying to get it right. And don't you think Maryland did a good job? I mean, it took long.
Yeah, they did. They did a pretty good job. Yeah. So what I think they're going to do, they always say we're taking our time and doing it right. So
more power to them. More power to them. We'll see.
But now, as it goes along, more and more states are doing it. So there's starting to be a template that you can use to
good regulations and
establish a recreational program. So
that works well, and exactly. So when is this going to happen, Phil?
Well, it's the work group has formed now, so they're this week getting together for the first time, and they're earmarked for presenting legislation that they can put on a ballot in 2022. So we're looking at next year.
Okay.
So
that's great.
But that's not the only place it's going on. Medical cannabis takes effect in Texas, I believe. What's going on with that?
Well, Texas is funny because they claim that, but then when you read these articles and find out what it really is, it's definitely bullshit.
Yeah, actually, this month in Texas, they just made, what was it? They just made cancer and PTSD now qualifies for medical marijuana.
Yeah, but
so you established a medical marijuana plan, and you said, let's not include cancer
or PTSD. Yeah.
So it's like if you've got 1 foot on the banana peel,
I mean, what's worse?
Right.
Well, listen to this. Okay, here it is. Texas expansion of medical cannabis access law takes effect. That sounds awesome when you hear it. Right. But then when you read the article, it says the changes permit physicians to recommend low THC, high CBD formulations of cannabis to patients diagnosed with post-traumatic stress and cancer. That's it. And the new provisions also increases the THC availability to, are you ready for this? From 0.5% to 1%.
That's barely out of the hemp category.
So it's really CBD. It's bullshit. Yeah. There's no THC in this stuff. Yeah. So that's Texas for you.
Well, what's going on in Mississippi now?
Mississippi.
They're very, 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 very close. I'm close. No, they tried to pass it before, and the governor said no. And now they've come back, and the Republicans are actually Kevin Blackwell, Senator Kevin Blackwell from the GOP from South. He says we've got all of our ducks in a row. We've talked to everyone else, and they're all saying that we got it this time.
Wow. Well, it's funny how the Deep South is really moving in that direction, isn't it? I mean, you're really seeing these red states. And you know why? Because a lot of them let the voters decide with ballot initiatives, right? So because the good old boys down south have been smoking marijuana for fucking decades. Right. I mean,
They've been smoking it since it was legal the first time.
They've been growing it out in the woods.
Since before 1937.
And there are a lot of, going back to the 70s, you look at guys like, Leonard Skinner types, who are conservative, good old boys in every other respect. But when it comes to growing their hair long and smoking weed,
they like their bong hits. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
Speaking of conservatives, I've got an interesting article here out of on Fox News. Okay, it's on their website, and this kind of made me angry when I read it. See what you guys think, and the reason is because I think it exaggerates greatly the results of this study. The title of this article is "Cannabis Use Linked to Increased Risk of Heart Attack Among Young Adults."
Oy.
Okay, so the thing is, here it is. Young adults using cannabis faced a 1.3% risk of heart attack compared to 0.8% of non-users. That's just bullshit. I mean, what's the difference? That's a rounding error. Not only that, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this article, but just to kind of give you the gist of it, it was a large study. I mean, it was over 33,000 people. But the thing they didn't take into account, many things they didn't take into account, but one of them is other possible contributing factors to the heart disease issue.
Like cigarette smoking,
bingo.
bad diet.
Bingo.
Yeah.
None of that was. So maybe the folks who are smoking cannabis also are smoking cigarettes. They also didn't take into account folks who get high using edibles or other safer, let's say, non-smoking. Let's face it. Most of the folks, and this is just an assumption on my part, a generalization, but if you're smoking weed, there's a better chance you're also a tobacco smoker, right?
Possibly, yeah.
I mean, I think that there could be some linkage there. So my point to this, the reason I bring this article up is because this is just, scaring people. It's just crazy. Yeah. The difference between 1.3 it is at 1.3% and 0.8. What the fuck? It's no difference. I mean, that's just that's a rounding error.
It's like the old saying: figures don't lie, but liars figure.
There you go. So anyway, that is what it is.
Now, there is another state where some stuff is going on in North Carolina, right, Andrew?
Medical marijuana was legalized on Cherokee land in western North Carolina back in May.
Wow.
Right.
Now, the eastern band of the North Carolina Cherokees have announced they're actually going to start selling herb to non-tribe members.
So that's interesting. Does that mean they can set up dispensaries and...
Right.
Does that mean they can set up dispensaries and sell to others?
That's what I think they're saying.
Wow.
Now, apparently, they're like 45 miles west of Asheville, North Carolina, which is where all the hippies went after Woodstock.
Yeah. That's a great town, man.
Yeah, that's where the muckaluk was invented, I believe.
What's with you and the Native Americans, bro? Like 3 weeks in a row, you've done a story on Native Americans.
Well, we've got to represent, man.
Well,
I think it's interesting.
I think it's cool. It is interesting.
Yeah,
and the Native Americans have a lot of freedom in terms of making their own rules and their own laws and their own legislation.
A lot of autonomy. Well, folks, I'm going to bring in our chief health and wellness correspondent, the one, the only, the inimitable Faye Berger Mitchell. How you doing, Faye?
Hey, guys.
So, Faye, how are things going with University of Maryland?
Yeah.
With your master's program in cannabis, whatever it is.
Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics.
I can't.
We're cruising. I know it's a mouthful. MCST.
Yeah, it's official though.
Yeah, it is official, and we're cruising along. So I'm in my second year. I have 2 8-week modules this fall, and then I have 2 8-week modules in the spring. We also have a capstone project, which I don't even know yet what that will be.
Right.
And some symposiums, some people who speak with us that we need to sort of write reflections on. So we're cruising through it, and it's I'm learning a lot about cannabis, a lot that I didn't know. As usual.
What?
Well,
give us some examples, Faye.
So right now, you're not going to like this because I'm totally the buzzkill here, but But
Faye Berger Mitchell, ladies and gentlemen, give her no.
yeah, right, exactly. You know, what can I do? I tell you, I think a lot of students in my class have also been it's been eye-awakening, because this current module we're taking is the negative social, physical, and psychiatric effects of cannabis. So, and I mean, you know, if you're going to be a person who works with patients who use cannabis, you need to know the upside and you need to know the downside.
Absolutely.
So we're learning a lot about that. And I think the main thing that's been eye-opening for everybody is, and I think you guys talked about this on your last podcast, Andrew, I heard you talking about it, that the cannabis of today is so different than the cannabis of yesteryear.
Right. Absolutely.
So, I mean, like right now, you know, back then it was 7%, highest 7% for THC. Yeah. And it also had a higher CBD content. So the CBD kind of mitigates the results of the THC. And so it kind of like mellows out your high a little bit, mellows out the effects of the cannabis. And I mean, you know, nowadays they're talking about 30, 32, 34% THC.
Yeah, that's too much. Well, you don't get the desired effect we had when we were younger. That's where you just chilled out. Oh, it's cool.
Mellow,
chilled out. I'm happy.
Eat a little bit. Right. Get hungry.
Good. Yeah, we're good. And now,
eat some Oreos.
You get anxious. You know, you get couch locked. I mean,
that's
not the desired effect.
No,
right.
No, that's not the desired effect. And I think what we're also finding out is that the therapeutic dosages of cannabis, if we're really talking about medical cannabis, that's a completely different story than adult use or recreational cannabis. You know, so medical cannabis is really very small microdoses. You know, 5 milligrams to 10 milligrams is considered a dose. Mm-hmm. You know, you start patients out, you start low and go slow. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you could start as low as 1 milligram of THC and titrate up from there. Sure. And have your patients, you know, keep track and monitor their feelings and monitor what's happening.
Sure. Yeah. So what level do they get a benefit? Right. And then they can stop there.
And so they go into the dispensary and the guy says, hey man, this is going to get you really high.
Right.
And I've had, you know, a lot of people have explained that situation to me, and that's really not what they want. It's also not what the doctors want. The doctors who are, let's say they're pro cannabis, they're okay with cannabis, but they know nothing about it. So they say, you know, they don't want their patients coming in there and getting like, you know, 32% THC totally wasted. I mean, you know, it's the whole idea of the medicine is to get the positive effects, the maximum positive effects with the minimum amount of negative effects.
Right. Sure.
So, you know, that's really what we're looking for. Yep. And, you know, I did some informal surveys on Facebook just to find out what people were seeing in various states. And, you know, I think Maryland has some of the highest reported THCs in the 32 to 34% range.
Wow.
Some
I can
people
usually
were saying
find that
36% in some of the states. But a lot of people reported they weren't real sure how accurate the testing is. So, you know, they test like one batch.
Gotcha.
And they test this one batch of one particular strain. And then they use that same information and apply it to all of all of the plants that come from that same strain.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And this is where compliance and legislation can play a part, where we're talking about like Maryland looking at a template for how to do it right. And this is the kinds of things that we need legislation for, to set standards for how to research and stuff like that. Do you agree with that?
It's kind of tough when you have 2,000 square foot growing room and you're growing one strain. It's all full of this one strain. And you take a bud from each corner and they sample that, you know, but even still, the bud on one plant,
exactly,
2 different buds could have different potencies. So it's really impossible to have a packet of buds and really all that information really be accurate.
Right,
it isn't.
Right. And the states, a lot of the states require the COAs, or their certificates of analysis. And I really think it looks like they need more quality precise testing instruments in order to get this accurate information.
Maybe.
Some states don't require terpenes being labeled. I'm just hearing stories and people within my program questioning how accurate the COAs are. And also they're questioning whether that people are sort of cooking the books because, a lot of people want to come in and get the highest THC possible,
right.
And when you're talking about an RSO capsule that has 1,000 milligrams in it, or somebody said something like, one that had 1,000 milligrams, that's like debilitating amounts of
that's like a 2-month supply.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
So I think what's happening is we are seeing negative health effects. And that's not good. That's just going to give it all a bad rap. It's going to give all the people who are anti-cannabis a lot of fuel and a lot of data to use against legalization in any way, shape, or form. So like they talk about, a cigarette has a certain standard, right? A cigarette has a standard. Alcohol, various types, a wine, a beer, or whatever they classify it has a standard of percentage of alcohol. And we just don't have that in cannabis.
That's true.
Now, what do you make of this article that Jay had about cannabis use linked to increased heart attack risks? Now, Jay, what were the numbers? It was like a difference between a control group of 0.8 and a cannabis group of 1.2. What do you make of that?
I mean, there's a lot of articles now circulating about that, and there is no question that cannabis, it's sort of time related. I'm seeing a lot of articles that say, like, if it's been a week since you've smoked, you're more likely. So what they're seeing in the emergency rooms is the closer it is to cannabis use, the more likely the heart attack. There's no question that cannabis increases your heart rate or tachycardia. There's no question about that. There also are studies that are showing that it narrows your blood vessels, the blood vessels that go to the brain and to the heart. So therefore, you're not getting the blood flow that you need. And particularly with people with pre-existing heart conditions, it's scary.
Or hypertension.
Cannabis can either raise or lower your blood pressure. However, if
or
you're
leave
prone
it the same.
towards, or leave it the same. But I'm figuring if you already have a pre-existing condition, and you're prone towards hypertension, I'm imagining this is just going to make it worse. And again, the studies are based on surveys and reports. And again, we always go back to, if we could legalize it, we could really study it. We could have clinical trials through the government, and that would give us more data. But it's these higher levels of THC that are promoting that.
Right.
We're already seeing the industry respond to this. Now,
are we?
Yeah, we are. Willie Nelson is coming out with a bunch of strains that are 14%. THC and have a high CBD. And I was looking on Weed Maps the other day at some of the Willie's Reserve, and they're 1-to-1 CBD to THC.
Yeah, I buy his products a lot.
I love that stuff.
I love his products.
I do too. When I worked in the dispensary, those were some of my favorite products.
Right. Yeah, me too.
He had some great products there, and that's kind of more like but back in the day.
Yeah.
Hey,
Faye, let me. It's a perfect segue into something you mentioned to me the other day. And that is, I hope I pronounced this correctly, the hypermesis?
It's a hard one. I call it cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome.
Okay.
And they're seeing... Okay, yeah, because they are really seeing... emergency room physicians are seeing more people coming in with what they call cyclic vomiting syndrome. And cyclic vomiting syndrome in and of itself is a problem that needs to be treated.
What does it mean?
It means that a person literally cannot stop vomiting, and they vomit so much that they become dehydrated, and they need to go into the emergency room because they're so dehydrated and they're depleted and they can't stop vomiting. But what's happening is the emergency room physicians would need to be educated. because the very first question needs to be, are you a cannabis user? And a lot of times they're not doing either a urine drug screen. Start with that to begin with. Ask about cannabis use. And what's happening is that a lot of these people are having unnecessary tests. They're putting them through scans and colonoscopies and
instead of
X-rays
asking the simple question, are you gotcha.
Are you a cannabis user? And I have to tell you, I've experienced some of that myself. Well, I feel like I've never had the hyperemesis part, so I've never gotten to the vomiting part. But I have developed, it's what's called a paradoxical relationship to cannabis.
I've heard a lot about this in the last couple of years.
Yeah. And if you are, it tends to be in chronic users, daily users, and it's like your receptors sort of down-regulate. So your body's just not processing cannabis the way that it's supposed to.
The way it once did.
Yeah. It's almost like, to me, it sounds like it like burns out your receptors is a good way to explain it in sort of layman's terms.
Well, it's kind of the same, having a glass of wine every day isn't going to hurt you, but people drink too much liquor and they get cirrhosis, Right. So exactly. It's just it's a byproduct of overuse.
Being involved in this industry and knowing a lot of people in this industry, I can think of 3 or 4 that I know of, including you, Faye, who have actually quit smoking because of this.
Yeah. And I really do. I attribute it to several. I attribute it to several things. I mean, I've always used it medically. Don't get me wrong. I've used cannabis for fun at a party, whatever. I believe in that.
Socially.
Yeah, socially. But I've also used it medically for my digestive issues. And it always helped my digestive issues. It helped me eat. It helped me get hungry. It helped, with like stomach pains. But specifically, and I can really trace it back to when I started working in the dispensary, and we get lots of different things to try out. We didn't get it for free. We had to pay for it. But, we're trying various strains. We're trying a lot of things.
And high potency, right?
Higher potency. And then the pandemic hit. And I think a lot of people turned to something or other, used a little bit more of whether it be food, alcohol, exercise, cannabis. I mean, there are a lot of ways in which people coped with the stress and the strain. Well, for me, stress and strain hits me in my stomach.
Right.
So therefore, it was almost like this, I'm chasing the symptoms. And as I'm chasing the symptoms, it immediately helps you feel better, but it wears off very quickly. So then you have some more, and then you have some more. So basically, it's a paradoxical relationship. And I got to the point where I was barely eating, and I just had stomach pain and stomach cramps. And I never really got to that hyperemesis part because I knew about it. And I said, I think this is
You saw where that was leading.
I saw where it was leading.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I just stopped myself. And currently, I don't use any cannabis for now. Some people say that you can use CBD strains. Some people say, no, it's any cannabinoids. There's not a lot of research, another area in which we need a lot of research. But I think the biggest thing, and I said this very early on, is that emergency room physicians and even gastroenterologists need to know about this. And they don't know about this. And if they would just ask this one simple question on their questionnaire about, do you use cannabis? That could save the patient a lot of tests, a lot of money, a lot of burden on the healthcare system. Right. So really, that's what's happening with this syndrome.
In addition, I think patients need to be honest with their doctors.
Well, that's the other piece of it.
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it.
And I can imagine how they would be reticent to say, I'm smoking weed, even to a doctor, but you should.
Well, and that goes back to educating the doctors. I mean, we've talked about this within my class, that cannabis questions should be under supplement use rather than under drug and alcohol use. If you ask somebody a question, do you use any supplements, vitamins, minerals, cannabis?
It's a little easier to answer the question. Yeah.
It destigmatizes it because it's an alternative therapy in the same way that supplements are an alternative therapy.
Instead of classifying it as drugs.
As a substance of abuse. Right. that being said, it can be a substance.
Well,
of
it can
abuse.
be, but anything can be. So, well,
Yes.
so Faye, what's next on the docket for your master's program?
My next class will be advanced therapeutics too. And I've chosen the therapeutics track. There are some people who have the track where it's more chemistry, where they're learning about the pharmacognosy and the genetics of the plant and the chemistry of the plant. That's pharmacognosy. It's a plant. It's a name.
That's a word.
Cannabis has its own language in and of itself, as we know. I wish I could take those classes as well because I really like chemistry. However, my plan to work with patients, I really need to take these advanced therapeutics classes. And these classes, what we do, like module by modules, we'll take a specific medical condition and try to basically, learn what's the best medicine, what's the best CBDs, THC, what combination, how many milligrams, that sort of thing. So how to treat a patient for that.
Well, in that regard, back to the cannabis use disorder, is there a way to diagnose it or a treatment for it besides just stop use?
It's really just stopping use.
Okay.
And it's, and if somebody has the hyperemesis syndrome, they're probably likely to have cannabis use disorder without even knowing it. It's the sort of thing because you do develop tolerance to THC. There's no question.
Okay.
So, but the difference being THC does not suppress your central nervous system. So you're not going to have like major withdrawal symptoms. You're not going to die. Kids could. That's a whole nother story we could talk about on another time. But kids getting into their parents' medicine is really a problem. But
well, that's true with any medicine, though. I mean,
exactly. Like, why don't they lock it up? People should lock it up. Oh, my kid ate my gummy bears.
Right.
Well, they don't make sour cherry flavored OxyContin.
Right, that's true.
Exactly.
Good point, Andrew. Good point.
And there are regulations in a lot of states with packaging and label, more so packaging, because you can see these packages that look just like a Kit Kat, but it's a Keef Kat.
They're really they're really busting on that.
That's wrong.
I read this one
People
case of a
buying
parent.
cannabis should know they're buying a drug.
Right.
Yeah, and I read a case of a parent who mixed it in with regular gummies.
Oh my God.
That's kind of irresponsible parenting, if you ask me. I mean, I have my
3 words for you: Child Protective Services.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
they actually do call that if somebody's in the ER, because I mean, when my kids were in their teen years, I have a lock on my alcohol cabinet and I have a lock on my medicine cabinet. I didn't know what kids are coming into my house and what they're going to be looking for.
So when are you graduating?
May 2022.
Oh, wow.
So this coming
spring.
May.
All right.
And it goes real quickly. It goes by very quickly.
Well, that's fantastic. And you will have a degree, a master's in, say it again?
Medical cannabis science and therapeutics.
Pretty cool. Pretty damned cool. And you'll be the first one that any of us knows with such a degree.
That's right.
And our class is the second graduating class, and the University of Maryland so far has the only master's program. I think there are others that are being developed. So, the program itself is a work in progress.
Well, cool.
But
Go Terps.
There you go.
Go Terps in more than one way. In more than one way. Yep. I love it. I'm a double Terp. I was also a Terp friend. I was a Terp undergrad too. So that was where I got my undergraduate degree as well. So
Well, this is fascinating stuff. We're so I'm so proud of you and happy for you. Because also, I think we need to say this. We've known Faye since high school. We all went to high school together.
We all went to high school together.
Yeah, we've known each other for over 40 years. So
we three and Faye go way back.
We three?
Way
and,
back.
We do indeed.
And weed too.
Right back to the parking lot of McGritter High School.
Yeah. Yes. However,
in
that's
lovely Montgomery County, Maryland, and we're all very proud of our heritage.
I want them to breed that cannabis. That's the medicine. And my platform now, and it's changed over time with this program, is responsible medicine. Use it responsibly.
Let me just ask you one final question. So do you think these high potency cannabis is definitely sort of helps or to blame for some of these medical conditions people are starting to see?
Yes, absolutely.
So if we just dialed it down. So in other words, if you think you might have issues here, and you don't want to stop,
Yeah.
Stop
Opt
smoking
for
high
the
potency.
lower levels.
Start
Well,
getting Willie's
if you
Reserve
get-
1 for 1.
Exactly. Or what you can do is you can go buy CBD flower and this high potency flower and mix it together.
Yeah.
Right.
Because a lot of this dispensaries, whoever, depending on who's purchasing, they're looking for the higher stuff and they're pushing the higher
And
stuff.
Right.
there are hundreds of tons of leftover CBD flower that all these hemp farmers grew that has nothing to do that you can buy, easily.
For nothing.
Exactly.
Very easy.
So mix it together.
Well, it's pretty fascinating stuff. Well, listen, folks, we sure have covered a lot of ground today, and if you have any questions or comments or corrections or anything you want to add to this discussion, we sure would love to hear from you. Check us out at VoteProPot.com. If you happen to be thinking about it and you get a mind to, go on Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating, tell a friend or 2 or 3 about the podcast. They would appreciate it. I'm sure you'd make better friends with them, to be quite honest. Jay, what else?
Send us an email at podcast@VoteProPot.com. And if you have a question for Faye, we'll be sure to get it to her. And in fact, if you send a question for Faye, we'll get her on the show to answer a question. How about that?
Yeah.
And you can reach me through my website as well. Well, Faye Canna Consulting.
There you go. Faye
And that
Canna
will be
Consulting.
in our show description as well. What else?
It is. Yep. Andrew?
We share a lot of information on social networking, so please get on all forums and help us out, share and on all platforms. So go to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and what was the other?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, and do a search for VoteProPot.